Frustrations rising over Baltimore's violent crime crisis.
The constant shootings, they repeat it.
We make residents' voices heard as they call for something to be done. The deadly Beltway crash is being put under the microscope. The safety requests workers asked for that they say could have prevented this tragedy. Maryland schools redact testing data but leave other student information open to the public. FOX45 News Project Baltimore investigates as some say they are trying to hide their shortcomings. Then, Maryland hemp retailers scrambling to save their business.
The governor said, leave no one behind. We feel more left behind than ever.
These strict conditions brought on by the new marijuana laws.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. The juvenile crime crisis in Baltimore City showing no signs of slowing down as more teenagers fall victim to crime. The latest teenage victim is a 15-year-old boy shot in the shoulder over the weekend.
Now, teenagers aren't just the victims of crime. We're also seeing examples of young people being accused of committing crimes, including last week's murder of a T-Mobile employee.
And tonight, Fox 45 News is demanding answers from our elected leaders as residents express their frustration.
Frustrating a lot, especially when it's in your neighborhood.
There are too many guns on the streets.
Well, Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor is pressing Governor Wes Moore for answers.
Our team coverage begins with Fox 45's Keith Daniels, though, and the frustration with violent crime overall. Keith?
Well, Mary and Kai, some residents say it's easy to be frustrated over any problematic issue when there doesn't appear to be any workable solution. And tonight, crime in the city and the frustration that comes with it. Monday in Baltimore City, coming off of a deadly weekend with 4 homicides and 3 non-fatal shootings since Friday through Sunday. A bleak, recognizable scenario with the familiar frustration from residents over violent crime.
There are too many guns on the streets.
The constant shootings, the constant shootings, the constant shootings. They repeat it. They used to be here and there. Now they just repeat it so much, so much.
Who wants to live in the city when you're fearful? We all want to have peace.
But peace seems distant, with some city leaders, including the Reverend P.M. Smith, who's calling on state lawmakers, notably Baltimore Senator Jill Carter, to crack down more on crime through legislation.
Miss Jill Carter is the mother for all these weak crime bills. She doesn't have a child. She's supposed to be a lawyer, but she doesn't have a child. She has no skin in the game. She doesn't have a clue.
As of Monday morning, so far this year, there have been 93 homicides and 206 people shot who survived. Police Commissioner Michael Harrison says his officers are getting the job done, despite a staffing shortage. In fact, BPD announcing one of its latest arrests today. 26-year-old Terrell Parker in custody, charged with attempted first-degree murder for the shooting of a man 2 weeks ago. Still, frustration lingers.
It's frustrating a lot, especially when it's in your neighborhood.
I don't blame the city leaders. I think they're trying the best they can. They inherited this problem. It's been here a long time. It's just been getting worse.
Well, we did reach out to Senator Jill Carter. I texted her and left a voice message on her cell phone, but so far tonight, we have not heard back. Reporting tonight, Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says he agrees that parents do have a role to play when it comes to juvenile crime. He says when it comes to young offenders, there needs to be a balance between keeping their age in mind while also focusing on a victim of a crime.
And I do feel the younger we're able to interact with young people who are screaming out for help or for support, the better it is for us in the system. Let's say 15, 16, 17 that commits a murder, where yes, have to look at that young person, but state's attorney, I have to look at the victim, because that victim is now gone. That victim's family will never hold their loved one again. And yes, I do recognize that the age of an individual is very important, their brain development is very important, but we still have to hold young people accountable. Young people need to know the difference between right and wrong.
Meanwhile, the city will start to enforce its youth curfew in just a few weeks. Mayor Brandon Scott put it in place to try and curb juvenile crime. At this time, we don't know a lot about the specifics of the mayor's plan. Critics argue it won't do much to stop juvenile crime. We pressed the mayor about it today.
Memorial Day is when it will start, and Memorial Day is when we'll be showing everybody what we're and how we're going to be doing, and doing it in a more evolved way than we have before.
So we're not going to see it until Memorial Day. Are we going to see it before Memorial Day?
So I'll say this again, maybe in a different way, Alexa. This is nothing new in Baltimore. Curfew is something. Curfew laws have been on the books. Enforcement has been on the books and have been doing that for many, many years.
Well, the rise in juvenile crime also raising questions over the state of juvenile services in Maryland, especially after last year's annual report described inadequate services and unsanitary conditions within DJS. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor questioned the governor on what he's doing to improve the situation.
18-year-old Arthur McCaden and his 14-year-old brother, the latest among a long list of Baltimore City youth accused of committing violent crimes this year. Both teens arrested in connection to the shooting death of Fabian Gonzalez during what police describe as a robbery gone wrong. Sources telling Fox 45 McCaden was already under DJS supervision at the time of the incident.
That's the troubling trend we're seeing across our city.
Councilman Zeke Cohen represents the district where Fabian was killed. No más violencia! At a prayer walk this weekend, both Cohen and Fabian's family calling for more accountability and oversight of DJS.
It is a conversation that needs to be with DJS.
If they were to be let out again, they could harm another family. We just don't know.
And in a report released last month, the Maryland Attorney General's office asking for the same. The report revealing widespread flaws and failures within the agency, including unsafe staffing levels, unsanitary living conditions, inadequate educational instruction, and an overall lack of services leading to, quote, persistent boredom. The report going on to read, quote, these young people need professional help and resources, and sending them to DJS facilities is entirely inappropriate. Meanwhile, in Annapolis, Governor Moore signing nearly 200 bills into law today.
Senate Bill 141.
None of which address youth violence, as legislation aimed at enforcing tougher penalties for kids committing violent crimes, once again falling short this session. In lieu of consequences, many lawmakers pointing to a wraparound of state services as the solution. However, with another young life lost and a 100-page report detailing the state's lack of juvenile services, Fox 45 attempting to question the governor on DJS oversight. But we were told he didn't have time for an interview, so we sent questions to his office asking, do you believe DJS is failing Baltimore City's youth who are currently falling victim to violent crime in record numbers? How will you address the reported issues within DJS? And will you call for a top-to-bottom review of the agency? According to Moore's administration, the governor was aware of the issues even before the report's release, and a thorough review of the agency is already in the works. The statement goes on to say his newly appointed DJS secretary has, quote, already replaced the head of residential operations and the superintendents of the two most troubled facilities. He and his chief of staff have also opened offices in both those facilities, all while the department has reduced the vacancy rate among facility frontline staff from 18% in January to 12% as of March. Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
And the statement from the governor's office goes on to say, quote, this is an issue that is deeply personal to the governor, and these aggressive moves show a major commitment shift from that of the previous administration. The statement ends by saying the governor will use every tool imaginable to give Maryland's young people world-class opportunities to prevent the violence the state has seen over the last few years. You can find the full statement on our website, foxbaltimore.com. And we want to hear from you. Do you think lawmakers are doing everything they can to get juvenile crime under control? So far, 97% of voters say no. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
There are new developments in Baltimore in that Beltway crash that killed 6 construction workers in March. A preliminary report from the NTSB last month listed speed as a factor between the 2 cars involved. And today, investigators returned to the scene to reconstruct the events of that day. Their goal, to find out how it happened. Fox 45's Jeff Abel joins us right now live with why some say this crash could have been prevented. Jeff?
You know, we're learning tonight that many of the workers had earlier complained about safety at this work zone long before that crash happened. In fact, it was a concrete wall just similar to this one that separated the workers and a lane of speeding traffic. And in many cases, there were wide openings in the wall.
On the Beltway today, a lane closure came without notice, but left many motorists backed up for miles. The State Highway Administration calls the planned closure part of an ongoing review of the work zone crash, a crash that happened less than 2 months ago when investigators say a vehicle plowed through an opening in a highway work zone, crashing into construction trucks and killing 6 workers. Sources tell us that some of those victims had repeatedly complained about safety issues in the work zone, asking that the lane of traffic closest to the work zone be shut down. At the time, only a concrete Jersey wall separated workers from speeding motorists.
If the construction workers and so forth felt as though it was unsafe, then that's an extenuating circumstance. They must have had some reason to make that request.
Investigators are expected to spend the next few days reconstructing the crash scene. Preliminary findings from the NTSB revealed that there were openings in the concrete Jersey wall that lined the work zone and allowed the speeding driver to enter seconds before that deadly crash.
That in itself is a safety concern because in that particular area there's no protection. The wall is not there, hence a vehicle could enter it by accident.
Gene Simmers is a retired highway traffic engineer with the SHA who was especially curious about today's lane closure.
I don't know what result can be gained by shutting the lane down now after the accident.
But today, the same lane of traffic that caused concerns before the crash is now closed for the investigation.
Is the lane being shut down today and the rest of this week or most of this week to protect the investigators?
Preliminary findings from the NTSB find that both drivers involved with this crash were traveling at high rates of speed. And according to state records, the last time speed cameras were used on this stretch of the Beltway was more than 6 years ago. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
All right, things may be dry and mild now, but take a look out to our west of Winchester. There is some rain and quite a bit more where that came from as we put it on the national loop. You'll see out toward Morgantown in West Virginia, down into northern and western Virginia. That rain starting to move east. Let's track it. Overnight, the clouds increase. And then as we head into tomorrow, yes, the on and off rain during the morning into the midday hours. A lot cooler tomorrow. I'm going to let you know just how many degrees it's going to be below what we saw for our 83-degree high today. My Weather Authority forecast.
Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight, some hemp business owners in Maryland are on edge as the legalization of recreational marijuana gets underway. The big changes they'll be forced to make and why it has them worried about their future. Survivors of sexual abuse at the hands of the Baltimore Archdiocese continue fighting for justice, what they're demanding tonight. And right after our break, growing calls for the Department of Education to unredact test results so the public can see them in Maryland. A look at the mounting pressure and new results from a state investigation in tonight's Project Baltimore.
Tonight, calls are growing for the Maryland State Department of Education to reverse course and restore test results to its website so the public can see them.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papst explains, pressure is mounting on MSDE.
The Maryland State Department of Education says it cares about student privacy. It's mentioned right here in a recent statement on its website. Quote, MSDE takes student data privacy seriously, and data suppression plays an essential role in that effort. The statement was released in response to this letter signed by 8 Maryland delegates. They asked State Superintendent Mohammed Chaudhry to explain why his department removed, redacted, and then reposted state test results to its website.
Government agencies shouldn't be changing data to conform to whatever narrative is that they want to tell.
Delegate Ryan Naraki signed the letter.
It was your story, frankly, and stories, I should say, that allowed many of us to know in the legislature here kind of what's going on, because it is very difficult to get that information.
For more than a decade, MSDE's guidelines for redacting test scores have remained the same. But in March, without telling the public, the state changed how it reports the data, hiding many of the results. The change came weeks after Project Baltimore reported that 23 Baltimore City schools and 7 Baltimore County schools had 0 students who took the test score proficient in math. MSDE says it further redacted test results to protect student privacy due to disruptions from the pandemic to ensure a reasonable person in the school community could not identify individual students. But take a look at this spreadsheet, also from MSDE's website. It lists all the Title I schools that receive additional funding for having high concentrations of poverty. What this means is MSDE will tell the public if 100% of students in a school live in poverty, but it will not tell the public if 100% of students in a school fail to score proficient in English or math. According to the state's website, Baltimore County has 3 schools with 100% poverty. If that's true, hasn't MSDE by default identified every student in that school as living in poverty? Suspension data is also posted on MSDE's website. This spreadsheet lists the number of suspensions at every school in Maryland. At Wah Chapel Elementary in Anne Arundel County, 1 student was suspended last year. We can also see that students' gender, race, and reason for suspension, all identifying factors. When reporting state test scores, if only 1 student takes the test, MSDE redacts the results, they say, to protect student privacy. So why doesn't that same standard apply to suspensions?
Well, I think you raised a great question.
State Senator Justin Reedy represents Carroll and Frederick counties.
But it's awfully convenient, and an entity, an organization, a taxpayer-funded government organization like MSDE has to be mindful also of how things appear.
MSDE declined our request for an interview on this matter, so we sent an email asking why some data that identifies students is redacted and some is not. We sent this email last Thursday. We sent a follow-up email Monday. We never heard back.
It looks to me like a government agency that found some reasons why they could excuse why they want to take data down that's embarrassing.
Senator Reedy last week added his name to this public statement issued by the Maryland Alliance of Parents and Students, which along with other groups is publicly demanding accountability.
The taxpayers are footing a huge bill, and taxpayers should be able to know what they're getting for the money they're investing. But to just do it and not tell anybody and then act like you and the media are the crazy ones for asking the questions is really disingenuous.
I'm Chris Papst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Meanwhile, the Maryland Inspector General for Education has released the results of his investigation into state test scores that were taken offline. The IG report follows a Project Baltimore investigation that found MSDE removed state test scores from its website and later reposted the results with much of the data redacted. MSDE said the data was mistakenly posted online before it could be fully redacted to protect student privacy. And because of learning challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, the state further redacted results using what it called enhanced de-identification.
The IG's findings reiterate what Project Baltimore has previously reported, that the federal government does require schools to limit the disclosure of personally identifiable information when reporting state test results. But the final decision on how to redact results is left to individual states. Therefore, the state superintendent of schools is within the scope of his authority. End quote. The IG report does not address who originally posted the state test scores and why the state has used enhanced redaction methods for school for years prior to the pandemic. Well, for context, all 4 states surrounding Maryland provide the public with more information about how schools are performing. They provided more information before MSDE enacted enhanced de-identification.
Everything that we've built over the last almost 5 years is about to be stripped from me in 60 days.
Will the start of recreational marijuana in Maryland mean the end of the state's hemp industry? Coming up at 10:30, why some business owners say that could be the case.
How much money will fix past wrongs? I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington with the figure a California panel settled upon for state reparations.
And the potential of some rain coming tonight into tomorrow morning's commute. You can already see it approaching on our HD radar from the Appalachians. I'm going to let you know after the break if it's going to impact your afternoon commute as well. But something it may help out with is washing out some of the pollen. Look at that. The grasses, my contacts, they know those pollen levels are high. Medium on the trees, oak and maple, no weed pollen, and the mold pollen or the mold allergen low to medium. I'm going to let you know when the rain ends. My Weather Authority forecast.
California is now one step closer to enacting the first statewide reparations program for African Americans.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has why critics are pushing back.
placing a dollar amount on suffering is a daunting task.
We cannot forget or ignore the fact that we stole people from their native land.
Over the weekend, California's Reparations Task Force approved a proposal to give each black resident $1.2 million to right historic wrongs. But activists say it's nowhere near enough.
So the equivocal number from the 1860s for 40 acres today is $200 million for each and every African American.
It's unclear how the state will pay for it. Economists predict the approved proposal of $1.2 million will cost $800 billion, nearly 3 times California's annual budget.
There is a $20 billion deficit, and there's a $1.5 trillion, T as in Tyrannosaurus, $1.5 trillion unfunded pension liability. From where is the money going to come? They're going to have to tax people.
On the other side of the U.S., Baltimore City exploring the idea of using additional tax revenue from legalizing marijuana to benefit low-income residents. City leaders see this as a form of reparations.
It would generate about $20 million for the city of Baltimore for the specific purpose of creating equity and reparations, which is what reparations are. It's creating an equitable response to a wrong.
Critics argue these reparations don't make sense.
Now, reparations is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves.
The Biden administration is considering adding a question to the U.S. Census asking black Americans if their ancestors were enslaved. Some experts believe this is to gauge who would be eligible for reparations should the federal government ever propose a plan. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
That brings us to our national question of the day. Do you support reparations for the descendants of enslaved people? Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote and click on the Pulse tab to weigh in.
We are taking a live look at Capitol Hill as we get a better idea of who might fill Democrat Ben Cardin's seat in the Senate, how the race is shaping up days after Cardin announced he won't run for re-election.
After years of asking why the Justice Department hasn't yet charged Hunter Biden, House Republicans are now asking them to hold off. I'm Christine Frizzell, and I'll tell you why.
We are following three big stories at 10:30.
The top priority for House Republicans is investigating President Biden's son, Hunter, but now it's asking the DOJ to hold off. The reason for the change.
New developments in the recently released report detailing sex abuse within the Baltimore Archdiocese, the new demands from survivors.
Recreational marijuana will be legal for Maryland adults starting July 1st. The governor signed the legislation creating the framework last month. It has some in the hemp industry worried about their futures.
It's like all these dreams that has been just like totally destroyed, you know, with the "we don't leave anyone behind" administration. I don't know. There's been a faith loss.
Well, the new legislation will force some in the hemp industry to make some big changes.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has a closer look.
These hemp business owners say they would have to apply for a cannabis license to operate their businesses that have been legal at the federal level since 2018. They say applying for those licenses in time to keep their businesses open isn't likely.
It'll be almost 3.5 years.
Andrea Grant opened Bethesda Health and Wellness with her dad in mind.
I lost my dad to pancreatic cancer in 2017, and I was looking for an opportunity to pay homage to him.
She says he embodied health and wellness. Grant says her inheritance from her father was the seed money for the store.
They have it in various strengths.
That has hemp-derived products everywhere you look.
We have 1,000 milligrams, which is where most people start.
From gummies and capsules to balms and tinctures, Grant takes her work seriously, offering customers solutions to health problems that sometimes have burdened them for years.
They come here almost as a last resort. They walk in with a smile, and I remember the time when they walked in either hunched over or just afraid or in pain or agony, and I see a completely different person.
When lawmakers gave the green light to the pot plan during the last legislative session, she was concerned. Language in the new plan includes a restriction on selling these hemp-derived products without a cannabis license, except for tinctures.
That would basically mean that we could sell only about 15% of our products. Who can survive on 15%?
Senate Bill 516. Cannabis reform.
Governor Wes Moore signing the cannabis framework into law, speeding up the concerns from other hemp business owners too.
He talks about, you know, no one being left behind, but like we're totally being left behind.
Derek Spruill owns Cherry Blossom Hemp, an online-based CBD and hemp product retailer.
Like in a capsule form or what have you, and gummy edibles of any kind, they're gonna be gone. Hemp is just high in CBD, low in THC. Marijuana is high in THC, low in CBD.
But with the July 1st deadline looming, when the budding cannabis industry is expected to flourish, that means Spruill will face uncertainty.
What business do you know can close July 1st with 3 months notice? How are you gonna make money in that time? It's almost a spit in the face.
That feeling of being left behind echoed by others.
Everything that we've built over the last almost 5 years is about to be stripped from me in 60 days.
Nicholas Patrick and his wife Megan own several hemp stores around the state and is the co-founder of the Maryland Healthy Alternatives Association.
They told us, no, we don't want to regulate you. We'd rather just erase you. We voted for recreational cannabis, but we didn't vote to have our businesses destroyed. So what are we going to do? We're going to explore every option as an association.
Patrick lobbied lawmakers to get carve-outs for hemp included in the final plan, but those efforts failing.
We just asked for time. Give us 12 months to figure out what to do about our leases, what to do about our employees, what to do about all the inventory that we have in here that we are invested in, so that some of us can avoid bankruptcy and then be able to transition into the new industry.
So far, time is not on these three business owners' sides.
I'm not ready just to give up just because of this.
Holding out hope something will change.
The governor said, leave no one behind. We feel more left behind than ever.
Before they have to close their stores for good.
This is like losing my dad all over again, because this was built with him in mind. I just can't even stomach that thought.
Before the end of session, we were told by some lawmakers that the language was written on purpose because they were concerned about a lack of regulation in the hemp industry. But these business owners again reiterate that they have been asking for rules and regulations to ensure all of these products are safe. In Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, here's what you need to know about Maryland's upcoming pot industry. Starting July 1st, adults 21 years of age and older can not have more than 750 milligrams of THC at one time. Consumers can have up to 1.5 ounces of marijuana flower at one time, and adults may grow up to 2 plants at home. And there will be a 9% tax on the product.
Well, new calls for Baltimore's Archbishop William Lori to resign following reports that reveal redacted names in the Catholic Church abuse scandal. Media reports in recent days revealed the names of several accused abusers, as well as church officials who allegedly knew about that abuse. Some of them still work inside Maryland parishes. Now, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, or SNAP, demanding 4 things from the Archdiocese of Baltimore: remove 5 newly named church officials from ministry, reveal all redacted names from the AG's report, call for the resignation of the Archbishop, and identify recent behavior within the church that protects abusers.
There are 2 parts to this. There are the perpetrators, the ones who actually did this, but the other part is the cover-up, and that's the part that we have to address. That's the systemic part of the Catholic Church's policy, and that's what has to change.
The Archdiocese has not yet responded to the new demands. Well, nationally recognized civil rights attorney Ben Crump is planning to file suit against the Archdiocese of Baltimore. We expect Crump to address the lawsuit tomorrow. Crump will also launch a petition calling for the passage of legislation that would remove the statute of limitations for child sexual abuse across the nation. Maryland lawmakers just passed a law that allows survivors to file retroactive lawsuits, even if their claims have already expired under an existing statute. We want to disclose that Ben Crump is an advertiser on this station.
Prince George's County Executive Angela Also Brooks could launch her campaign for Senate this week. That, according to Time magazine. In 2018, she was the first woman elected as Prince George's County Executive. With Senator Ben Cardin announcing he won't seek re-election, the Democratic primary field is expected to be crowded. It already includes Montgomery County Council member Will Jawando, perennial socialist candidate Jerome Siegel, and Democratic Congressman David Trone, who, as of now, would be Also Brooks' biggest and best funded competitor.
Well, since taking the majority of the House of Representatives, Republicans have made it a top priority to investigate President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. They say they plan to share evidence later this week that connects large sums of money from countries like China and Russia to both Hunter Biden and his father. National correspondent Christine Frizzau has the latest.
As the federal investigation into Hunter Biden appears to be drawing to a close, a new plea from House Republicans, leading an investigation of their own.
My message to the Department of Justice is very loud and clear. Do not indict Hunter Biden before Wednesday.
Wednesday is when GOP lawmakers plan to reveal evidence they've been poring over for months, including suspicious activity reports from bank accounts and interviews from former business partners. They say implicate both Hunter Biden and his father in a, quote, pay-for-play scheme.
We don't believe this was just a coincidence that all these Biden family members were receiving money from this web of LLCs into their personal bank accounts. We believe this was done in exchange for something.
Still no word on what that something could be. But Peter Schweitzer, who first raised questions about Hunter Biden's business dealings in his book, Secret Empires, says we could be closer than ever to finding out.
This is going to be a roadmap that we've never had before. When the Senate looked at this in 2020, they did not have subpoena powers. Certainly I did not as an author when we first researched and exposed this in 2018.
Hunter Biden's lawyers recently met with the DOJ, presumably for an update on the case, which dates back to 2018 and deals with charges related to failing to report his income and making a false statement to purchase a gun. Charges House Republicans assert pale in comparison to information they now have. President Biden, meanwhile, has been steadfast in his support of Hunter.
First of all, my son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him. And it impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him.
Hunter Biden's legal team for years has been silent on these matters, but lately appears to be fighting back. There are also new reports a legal defense fund is being set up to help cover the millions of dollars in costs, an entity already raising questions about ethics and oversight. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
With just a few days left until the expiration of Title 42, a pandemic-era policy allowing the quick expulsion of migrants, thousands are lining up at the southern border to get into the United States. We're seeing new footage where hundreds of migrants waited in U.S. territory behind barbed wire. They say it's safer there than on the streets of Mexico. Border Patrol agents say in the past few days, they've encountered more than 26,000 migrants, and they're averaging almost 9,000 a day.
Taking a look now at the Fox Box top left, New York City Mayor Eric Adams getting some pushback on his latest plan to address the surge of migrants in the city. Adams says the city will bus hundreds of willing migrants to 2 nearby suburbs. In response, Rockland County issued a 30-day state of emergency to block the plan, saying it would be unsustainable for them to house the migrants.
On the top right, jurors are set to begin deliberations in the civil battery and defamation trial against former President Trump. Writer E. Jean Carroll is accusing Trump of raping her in the 1990s. Trump's attorneys call the case outrageous.
Bottom left, the top Republican investigating the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan is threatening to hold Secretary of State Antony Blinken in contempt of Congress. House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul accuses Blinken of not handing over sufficient information. The State Department disagrees.
And on the bottom right, businesses in 2 Chicago neighborhoods are being encouraged to install riot glass after a string of recent robberies to keep thieves out. Some say